He doesn't study that. He takes all that money and he uses it to incubate pharmaceutical drugs for the industry, which he takes part of the patent of those drugs that he develops, sells the drugs to transfer the ownership to pharmaceutical companies, and they produce those drugs, and his agency collects the part of the royalties on many of them. Between 2009 and 2016, 100% of the drugs that were approved by FDA came out of his shop. So he's become the incubator for this industry, and he's not doing what we are paying him to do, which is to tell us, why are our kids so sick? Why are more than 50% of our kids debilitated by lifetime chronic diseases? Why isn't anybody studying this? And that's, I love your approach to it. I wish you were the Secretary of HHS and you were redirecting this thing to actually saving humanity.
Well, I think, we can do it faster than HHS can, and I'm excited by this. So I left the university setting in 2010 and started my own clinic. And within 2 years of starting my clinic, we started studying soil and found some molecules in soil that uncovered a whole new medicinal concept. That bacteria were making medicine was a new world for me. And so we dove into that and started my own biotech company, with a private lab for $10,000. And with that $10,000 lab, we started to prove out that Roundup and glyphosate were really at the foundation of destroying the innate immune system through disruption of the tight junctions and other protein structures within the human cell. And so I'm struck by how small amount of money, $10,000 versus the, $1.5 billion or $4 billion that the pharmaceutical industry tells you it takes to find a drug. We found medicine within nature, and we're able to extract that from soil systems, 60 million years old soil systems, and put them into dietary supplements for a total of less than $25,000, because we didn't have to outthink nature. Instead, we tried to co-create with nature. And so I believe that the future is not trying to leverage hundreds of billions of dollars for pharmaceutical development and research. The future is around dumbing that way back to say, what happened to human biology between the destruction of topsoil in a couple hundred years back and now, and how do we reinvent that relationship, or how do we foster that relationship between soil, water, and air systems and human biology? And the speed at which we heal is dumbfounding. And so my excitement is, we don't have to wait for HHS or anybody else. What we need to do is create a consortium of health, energy, ecology, and food system experts and leaders to create the future that we want. We need to work together to say, here's a method for creating clean, healthy soil. Within 3 years, we can take toxic, chemically grown, dead dirt and turn it into vibrant soil systems that are clean of any residues of glyphosate and all that in 3 years. What if we did that over a sector? And then what if we partnered that with a new methodology for holding water within soils instead of letting it run off into distant river systems, and create microclimates out of that? We can reverse desertification. Texas and other critical areas of the United States that have desertified over the last decades. What if we just started to reverse engineer all that? The humans that were then in those environments would radically be changed immediately. And we can do this in micro, climates, in the sense that we can change just the lunch for children on the west side of Oahu, Hawaii here. They started a program for a regenerative farm integrated with children's education. And 100% of the Native Hawaiians that were in the study going in were pre-diabetic. And these were children under the age of 18. Within 3 months, 100% of them were free of pre-diabetes. Just changing one meal a day and helping them interact with that garden space and grow regenerative foods. They became part of the workforce. They became part of the educational experience around it. And that radically changed their health in 3 months. You just changed somebody on a lifetime trajectory for diabetes, early heart disease, amputations, ultimately death from cardiovascular causes at a young age, to somebody who now at 15 has a completely different trajectory in life. That's one lunch. And so we're very excited about that potential. And so I'm a portfolio manager for a new impact philanthropic fund that's just launched called the Human Resiliency Fund. And many of our projects that we're funding through this huge philanthropic operation are showing scientists and teasing out the innate immune system. How does the human innate immune system become supported by its environment? And how can we flip the switch on that immediately so that the 24 heaviest hit communities that are all largely BIPOC communities, low socioeconomic environments around the United States that got hit so hard by something like the recent pandemic, how can we move in there and switch that one lunch up and create regenerative food systems? So one of the things we're scaling up is Eric Cutter's work with Alegria Fresh in Irvine, California. He installed a growing system with the food bank in Irvine in March with Bank of America emergency funding for COVID. $150,000 built this growing system that will produce a massive amount of produce. They had their first harvest within 6 weeks of installation on top of pavement. And so it goes in on top of old asphalt parking lots, and you're growing regenerative food within 6 weeks. Within 3 weeks, within 10 weeks, you have your third harvest. And so you've got this massive generative machine. They can then leverage that for more money, and you end up with almost 1 million pounds of produce feeding over 500,000 individuals out of that one food bank, out of $150,000. And so we're going to expand this program. We're turning into a 12-month growing system in all ecosystems with the addition of greenhouses within this growing system and the like. For less than $1 million per center, we can set up year-round regenerative agriculture food systems in these food deserts within urban environments for sure. But I'm very excited to install one at a test prison system to show improved function of neurologic function and recovery for prisoners and to reduce recidivism and improve outcomes as they come out of prison. I'm excited to set one inside of a school. I'm excited to set one inside of a Navajo reservation. I'm excited to put these in these food desert environments to show that resiliency at the human level is nearly instantaneous when we align with nature just through our food system itself. And so I'm excited that HHS can continue its pathway. I don't have any hope of untangling that situation in my lifetime, but I can make it obsolete. And so I can make that system obsolete if I create a for-profit system within the ecosystem of innovation of humanity and show them independence. Nobody avoids independence. You show somebody resiliency and independence and autonomy, every human on the planet is going to want a piece of that. I don't care if you're a billionaire who's now become aware of how sensitive your food system is, your food chain. You've seen 3,000, 6,000 mile supply chains disrupted with a pandemic. I don't care how much money you have, the grocery store shelf is still empty. And so what are we going to do to decentralize the food system? It's going to be through systems like this that we can scale up locally so that each neighborhood, every block can have their own growing system. The resiliency in that food system is out of control cool. And we will solve the chronic disease epidemic by that one intervention of good regenerative food, access to real soil, that will clean up our air ultimately. And so the Human Resiliency Fund for family offices, foundations, and large net worth individuals that are SEC certified, you can look into that fund. It's exciting because with just $100 million, we can overcome trillions of dollars of old paradigm. By making these targeted, strategic, and tactical investments to radically change the innovation space, radically change in the human biology will respond so fast. Mother Nature has got her hand and arms out to us. She wants to welcome us back into a thriving state as a species within her womb again. We don't need to solve the problem. She already has the solutions. We need to stop our banging our head against her and realize that we are from nature, not against nature. We are the result of the microbiome. We are not against the microbiome. We are literally the adaptive experience of the biome itself. We would not be human. We, in fact, could not have mammals without the intelligence of the biome having built our genome. Our genome is the result of a direct insert of viral data 52% of the human genome directly inserted from viruses over the last few billion years. So we would not be here without the virus. We would not be here without the health of the microbiome within us. The paradigm is already there. The science is already proven out. Now it's time for mobilization and a coherent plan for the public. And so that's my excitement, is we can just shake it off. It's so easy to get stressed out about the powers that be, and you hear things about a deep state or a cabal or all these things. Like, we're in the driver's seat, literally. We can keep going down that fear and guilt paradigm and play into the whole thing, or we can just create an alternative pathway, and the whole thing, no matter how powerful it feels, is going to fall apart instantaneously because we simply extricated ourselves from that environment and we created the future that we want. And so I'm excited that just like the innate immune system, different than the adaptive immune system, we don't have to fight against anything. The innate immune system is an intelligent, adaptive machine that keeps us in a healthy relationship to biodiversity. And in fact, it embraces biodiversity. It never tries to kill a virus or kill a bacteria. It looks to welcome that biodiversity into its environment. We now just need to build socioeconomic and political environments that look like that. What if we invited every opportunity to create more biodiversity within our political thought process and our societal patterns of behavior and ultimately your dinner table? When was the last time your dinner table became a nidus for fellowship with biodiversity? Think about that for your socialization. And so this is how we create the new future nearly instantaneously.
How do you anticipate that Bill Gates is going to be writing you a big check for that fund?
Bill Gates is a huge opportunity, because if you look at, you know, 2 months before the outbreak of the pandemic, we get a big Netflix series on Bill's brain. Incredible timing there. This is the most public thing that Bill's ever done, is this Netflix series on himself and all the books he reads and all the Diet Coke he drinks. And from a physician standpoint, I watched that and said, wow, he is going to be very well preserved in the grave, because when you drink Diet Coke, it actually turns into formaldehyde, and so his tissues are full of formaldehyde, so he may never rot in the grave. Enough Diet Coke there for preservation. But from a bigger standpoint, when you see him sitting down with Warren Buffett in the cafe, and he's drawing out on his napkin, like, well, we went in and attacked polio over here, but then it popped up over here in northern India. And so then we put people on bikes and we infiltrated there and we got it suppressed there, but then it popped up over here. And he's playing this whack-a-mole game with polio in northern Italy right now, or northern India right now, because he's got this mindset of, like, I can outthink this virus. I can outthink it if I can just do the right things and put enough money into it. But what is obvious from my standpoint, with the radical explosion that happened to my old paradigm, if I'd watched that 10 years ago, wouldn't have even thought about it. Yeah, he's on a journey trying to beat polio. What became so obvious while I'm watching that is the scientists that are advising Bill Gates and his fund handed him a two-dimensional chessboard, and he's trying to move the checkers around on this board in this two-dimensional plane, and he can't win, because the microbiome is a three-dimensional ecosystem, which is soil, water, and air. The air we breathe, 10 to the 31 viruses. The water that we bathe in, 10 to the 30 viruses. The soil we eat from, 10 to the 31 viruses. 10 to the 31 is 10 million times more than stars in the entire universe. Like, these are massive numbers of viruses. And here he's trying to beat it out with this, like, little human strategy. There is no human strategy for balance with the biome. It's a biology strategy. It's a Mother Earth strategy. Humans are a tiny little piece of the puzzle. And so I'm excited to hand Bill Gates a three-dimensional model. I say, you know what? You want to stop epidemics in India of any type, whether it's endemic polio or HIV, or you pick your thing. I can show you how to beat that in less than a decade by changing the innate immune system of that population. And we did it in the United States successfully to eradicate polio. We didn't do that with a vaccine. We did it to changing the ecosystem around those kids. So we chlorinated pools. We put kids into an environment where they were no longer bathing in those warm environments that would proliferate the milieu for that virus to overexpress itself in the environment. We stopped irradiating the tonsils of children. We stopped cutting out the tonsils of children in the 1970s, finding out that universal tonsillectomy was a terrible idea, because that's the beginning of their innate immune system as well as their adaptive immune system and their upper respiratory system. You give them back their tonsils and stop swimming in warm pools in the middle of summer, suddenly polio was gone. Polio was radically diving before the polio. I think that was one of your slides in your presentation. Polio is declining, then the Salk Institute puts out the polio vaccine, and then it goes away some 15 years later when we finally stop cutting out tonsils, and we finally chlorinate pools, and it goes away. We changed the ecosystem, and it disappeared in 10 years. And so we can do that throughout the whole world. HIV and AIDS in Africa, that's an old story. We need to go into Africa with an innate immune system building program where we start giving microloans to individuals within Africa to build their own resilient food system, and HIV and AIDS will become an old story there. Now, we need to support these fundamental building blocks of human biology, and the biology will figure itself out. The microbiome, if the human cells can't figure out, the bacteria definitely will. There's a bacteria on the planet for every single toxin ever invented. Radioactive material flowing out of Fukushima at 1 million gallons of seawater a day still pouring into the Pacific Ocean out of Japan right now, years after the event. 1 million gallons a day of radioactive material dumping in, and Pseudomonas is gobbling it up. Pseudomonas loves radioactive uranium. And so it's so exciting that the microbiome has a niche to solve all toxic problems. The reason we are not being detoxified by the microbiome is because we think they're against us. And so we keep eradicating them with more and more violent efforts. We're Cloroxing every plane now. We're literally on the most nuclear effort to destroy the microbiome in this pandemic that I could ever imagine. And for that, we will speed our demise. But if we change our behavior, if we become a co-creative element within nature, we could blow up a paradigm.
So we're almost out of time, Zach. I want to talk to you about COVID and what you are. You're saying. I get your point, and that viruses are our friend. And so, what do you? I mean, this thing is so baffling, isn't it? Because it really doesn't. It doesn't behave like any virus that we've ever seen. Larry Pilevsky said to me recently, he said, every other virus that we've seen, it causes you to expel things. It causes you to expel snot and cough and to expel liquid from tears from your eyes and to break out in rashes. And this thing doesn't have any of that. And so, there's so much speculation about what's causing it, whether it's a virus, whether clearly it's real and it's happening and something is killing all these people. But what is your diagnosis and what is your prescription?
Beautiful. So there certainly is coronaviruses. They've been around for, documented some 750 years in the human biology. So we've had them around for centuries. Coronaviruses mutate all the time, just like all the viruses are mutating at rapid rates whenever biology decides that there needs to be an adaptation event. So if a pig or a bacteria in the middle of China under the stress of massive antibiotic pressure from the agricultural system that's so toxic, and then it's trying to find a loophole or an escape mechanism to get out of the extinction level pressure that bacteria or that pig is under, it's got the ability to take in viral information, reconfigure it or misspell it and put it back out in the environment. So biology is constantly churning out adaptation versions of viruses, and the more pressure we put on biology, the more stress we put biology under, the faster it makes viral components, viral variants. And so the diagnosis that we have in the past year is, first of all, we were waiting for this to happen. There was going to be a big event in 2019-2020 flu season, and it could have been any virus. We chose to highlight coronavirus, but I'm convinced that it was many viruses that caused this far beyond coronavirus. Why? Because in 2018-19 flu season, we had the lowest mortality, especially in elderly, that we had seen from flu in over 7 years. And so we had pent-up demand at the mortality level of the high likelihood that the next year coming around, we had a population that aged another year, another accumulation of chronic disease and age, and now they're going to be exposed to the next viral season. So we were going to see a relatively high mortality no matter what, because of that simple reality that we had less death the year before. And so that was the setup for what we would end up calling a pandemic. We have pandemics all the time. We've had 12,800 documented viral respiratory pandemics since 1976 when we added glyphosate in. That is a huge acceleration event since the previous 25 years before that. So we have pandemics on a weekly basis of viruses that we can track around the globe that are traveling with new variants that cause common cold or respiratory flus or pneumonia or whatnot. And so we have all these viruses there. So we were set up for a bad 2019-2020 respiratory season. We then chose to peg it on a single virus, but that virus is only present in the bloodstream, and the CDC has put this out, WHO, they all say that the virus is only present in the bloodstream at any measurable level for 3 to 5 days. And it usually peaks around your first day of symptoms, meaning that within a day and a half or two after your symptoms come on, there's no more virus detectable in your bloodstream. And of course, the mortality that comes downstream is weeks later. And so to say that we're dying of any virus is very inaccurate at the science level. What we're dying from is a cascade of immune events that happen on the tail end of exposure to a new viral variant that's not in a healthy relationship to our innate immune system, which has been damaged by all of our chemical environment. And now we're generating an inflammatory, adaptive immune system response when we should have just been in simple balance with the innate immune system. The innate immune system never makes an antibody. It doesn't need one. It's not killing anything. It simply edits the genomic information flowing into our cell. It also blocks that genetic information from ever entering our cell. And so it's not until we lose the innate immune system that the adaptive immune system even becomes a significant discussion point. But it never is responsible for clearing the virus. And so when you describe the snot and the usual expelling symptoms that are coming from a common cold, for example, that's not the virus causing it. That's your immune system building a cleanup result. And your mucus is actually a bunch of dead cells that are just being expelled from the body and cleaned up. It turns out, though, that this virus doesn't cause widespread damage within the respiratory tree. It actually causes most of its change in physiology in the red blood cell. And by changing the shape of the red blood cell, we get this toxicity of hypoxia. And so people are dying from hypoxic injury in the last 18 months. We've chosen to call it COVID-19, which is the syndrome, not the virus. The virus is SARS-CoV-2. So SARS-CoV-2 is present for 3 to 5 days, gone, by way of the innate immune system, by the way. It takes weeks later before any antibody will develop, meaning that the antibody had nothing to do with the clearance of the virus. It's very important for anybody who's asking themselves, should I take a vaccine or not? The vaccine can only make an antibody response. It does nothing to help your innate immune system actually stay in balance with viruses. And so when you ask yourself, should I take a vaccine? You aren't even asking the right question from a science standpoint. The science would say that a vaccine has nothing to do with your relationship with viruses. Your innate immune system has everything to do with your relationship with viruses. So what should you do? You should have a diverse microbiome, which means you should be outside as much as possible, grow gardens, get outside as much as you can, fresh air, fresh soil, all that. And so what we need to do is realize we're dying from hypoxic injury, not from some viral infection. And the location of this coronavirus hitting respiratory epithelium and then making us prone to this injury to the red blood cell, which then changes the oxygen carrying capacity, and the event at the science level is called histotoxic hypoxia. Histotoxic hypoxia is caused by cyanide in the air. And so the most common toxin that we find, and actually Earth Justice sued the U.S. government months before the pandemic, that we were seeing cyanide levels higher in our inner city environments than we had ever measured. And they sued for the government for not putting out warnings of cyanide poisoning, which is going to look exactly like COVID-19. It turns out that this virus, coronavirus, binds to a carbon molecule in the atmosphere in air pollution called PM2.5 that carries cyanide. And so the virus became a vector for cyanide. And so what we have seen in the last 21 is a consistent viral experience where you might get a little cough, you might get this, but then another percentage of the population is getting a much deeper injury of hypoxic injury, this histotoxic hypoxia from air pollution combined with the virus as a carrying agent in. So the toxicity isn't really from the virus at all, but from all the junk it's capable of carrying into the cells. So we're dying from the poisoning of our own environment that we've toxified, which is some sort of poetic justice probably. But it's a tiny little ditzel in our march toward extinction. If anybody thinks this has been bad this last year, take a look at human population, which continues to go like this over the course of this past year. Wait until you see the real extinction event tip in. When we start to bury millions and millions of people, we are going to start to realize what real extinction is going to look like. We haven't even started to see the problems we've created, but we can avert the crisis if we rapidly adapt to Mother Nature's pathway.
Zach, I hate to let you go. I got a million other questions for you. They just approved this Pfizer vaccine, and I want to talk to you about that, but I will have to wait till another time. Really, what a pleasure talking to you. please keep your mitts up, keep your head down, and keep fighting for all of us.
Right back at you, Robert. So honored to be on with you. Thank you for your decades of promulgating for the human species and for Americans at large. Thank you for who you are and appreciate who you are. Maybe we should run on that Bush Kennedy ticket and break out the
Well, that's a good idea. Exactly.
Thanks.